Oh, hi. Throw that on the ground there. Not throw it. It's a book. I was just reading, trying to get ready for this video. This is NeverEnding Story. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam, and I love movies. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and the nostalgia of those times will always stick with me. But sometimes nostalgia can cloud your vision of things. So come with me as I go through the movies I swear all my life I've loved, and let's see if I can still see the magic that I once did. This is Adam's Retro Rewatch. Hello, everybody. I'm back with another Retro Rewatch, and this time, if you didn't catch it by the intro, is The NeverEnding Story, the 1984 fantasy movie. I think so. 84, yeah. It stars nobody in particular. It stars Noah Hathaway. He really hasn't done much. In fact, the only actor I could think of that actually did more notable roles after this was Deep Roy, the little person. He was all of the Oompa Loompas in the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about The NeverEnding Story. And this is a movie that if you were a child of the 80s, you had to love. It was just one of those that you were supposed to love when you were growing up in the 80s. And I was no exception. I spent my entire childhood watching it and my entire adulthood talking about it, and always, just it was always something that we would be able to discuss as uh, a nostalgic piece of our childhood. So I wanted to dive back in and see if it still had the magic that it used to. A real quick synopsis: The NeverEnding Story is about a kid. His name is Bastian, and he loves books, and he loves drawing horses too.
Unicorns. They were unicorns.
One morning, he was running away from bullies, and he ducked into a bookstore to hide from them. And the proprietor of the bookstore was very angry at him for being a child. He thought he would never read a book. He made fun of him because computer games and video games were all the rage, and the kid had to be stalwart in his I love books. I've read, I forget how many he wrote. He didn't write any, he read them.
On your way, please.
I know books. I have 186 of them at home.
Anyway, him and Bastion kind of formed this kind of camaraderie while talking. Not really. The bookstore proprietor, owner, whatever, is always angry at Bastion, even though he understands story books and books. Bastion ends up stealing the book that the guy was reading because it seemed very interesting when he told him that the book was not safe. And then he runs back to school. But instead of going back to school, he skips his classes. I mean, he goes back to the school, but he goes into the school's scary attic. It's very scary. It has stuffed animals, not like soft cuddly animals, but stuffed bears and crazy stuff you would see maybe in Mikey's attic from the Goonies. But he sets up there determined to read this book. He's more interested in the book than he is in anything in the world. But then the story turns to what's in the book as Bastian reads and narrates the movie. And it's a book about a fantastic land full of rock-eating rock people, which seems kind of weird to me. Super fast snails and dragons with feathers and scales. It was the 80s. It was directed by a German director in Toronto. So there you go. I guess that's an explanation. But the whole conflict of the movie is there's this blight, they call it a nothing, that is basically engulfing the land and just turning it into a black void. And the only way to stop it is by having the childlike empress call on the great warrior Atreyu, which is also a kid, who also gets ridiculed for being a kid.
Not Atreyu the child, Atreyu the warrior.
Even though he does what he's the best that he is at what he does. He's Wolverine? No, he's the warrior Atreyu. And you can see the parallels between Atreyu and Bastion, mainly because Bastion is the one reading the story, and the way the book goes, you become that character, and that becomes more evident as the movie goes on, because Bastion is helping the story unfold while reading it. It's an interesting way to tell a story about a story. Anyway, Atreyu goes through all sorts of perils to find the answer to stopping this nothing, this blight that's destroying the land. While this is going on, Bastion has no longer skipped school. He's not gone home. He's still in the attic. He's basically become a runaway just so he could finish reading this book. And it's kind of interesting because he really gets into it. He yells and screams so loud that the characters in the book can hear him. But none of the school staff or custodial staff can hear him, so I don't know. Maybe they have really good soundproofing in the school. But that's a quick synopsis of the movie. I'm not going to go into like every step. I just want to talk about, what it was basically about. And the big thing it's got going for it is it's not an ordinary story. Being a young mind who wanted to become part of a fantasy world just by reading it is basically the epitome of why we read fiction and we really get into it. You want to be part of that world. And with this book, this NeverEnding story book, you can do that. And that is what made this movie appealing to us as young people. But that doesn't make it necessarily a great movie. A good story is a good story. I mean, it's adapted from a book, but the movie story is an absolute mess. The plot points were cherry picked from the book. It doesn't really follow a cohesive story. It's very quick paced. One thing's happening to Bastion, and then suddenly he's doing something else, and then suddenly he's doing something else. It was so detached from the book that the author campaigned to get his name taken off of the film itself because it was so distant. And it shows. The stuff I remember being big emotional scenes were super rushed and never really gave the time to sink in. It's like watching someone play a video game, and instead of watching the story unfold, they always skipped through the cutscenes to get to the next level. And that's what this movie is. It's basically skipping the meat to get to the action, and it's very disappointing that it was set up that way. Now, the makeup effects and animatronics in this movie are phenomenal. Some of the best creature creations I've seen. There's one scene in particular towards the beginning of the movie, the beginning of scene Fantasia, which is the name of the fantasy world because it's original. But there's one scene at the Ivory Tower where all of the delegates from all of the lands in Fantasia are there, and some of the character and creature effects for those delegates are unbelievable. They make the cantina scene in Star Wars look like Halloween masks. And I know George Lucas always thought that they look terrible, but we have that. And we have what they did in 1984 with latex and practical makeup effects compared to what the fixed version of Star Wars looks like now. And it just shows that a keen attention to detail can make or break how a scene works, how a scene looks. Practical filmmaking can make your movie look good, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is good. It's a strange feeling watching this movie as a discerning adult. I mean, don't get me wrong, the nostalgia factor is still there. The title song is still fun and dancey. Uh, but the NeverEnding Story is just one of those few movies that is screaming for a proper adaptation. It's only half the book. Even the stuff that was cherry picked and just like nipped and grabbed and placed in the movie only constituted maybe 40 to 50% of the actual book itself. There's a lot it could be done, and it just needs a remake adaptation. And I'm looking at you, Peter Jackson. You do your fantasy magic. So the big question: do I still love the NeverEnding Story? No. And it pains me. It pains me to say that. But the world has outgrown this hastily made product of its time. It has terrible pacing. The characters that could be strong and deep didn't get the time to grow. Everything in the movie was rushed to throw in the cool effects and cool sets that they forgot about character development. And the editing is atrocious. It should be taught in film schools on how not to edit a movie. And it'll always be sad for me to realize that something that you considered a major part of your childhood was a major disappointment. But as an adult, my eyes are open and tastes change. It's not a very good movie, and I still want it to be as good as it was when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Because of that, I will still put it on the pedestal of classic 80s movies. But it's not that good. It is not a good movie. This movie is just nothing. Like the antagonist in the picture. It took away all imagination and all magic from my world. Well, my world of the NeverEnding Story, because whoever reads the book and I guess watches the movie has a different version of it in itself, just like Bastion in the movie. So that's my view on the NeverEnding Story. I would love to hear your take and probably abuse in the comment section below. If you like what I do, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's fine. If you don't like it, then don't. It's fine too. I do this for you guys, so sometimes the truth hurts. But if you want to subscribe and like the video. That would be awesome. Also, if you want to hear me and my other friends talk about movies on a more stretched out basis, check out our podcast, Cinemadness podcast. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on everything you can get your podcasts on. Oh man, I need to go watch something else. Something that will help me forget this tragic loss of nostalgia in my heart. I wonder what I'll watch next. NeverEnding Story.